If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black. Then you ain't black. If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black. Then you ain't black.
Let's look at something very, very interesting. I think you're going to enjoy this. So let's go there. Let's go there. All right, so now we're taken here to their official site. Then it says here that this AB Charities is a registered charitable organization formed to democratize charitable giving. What party is the party that's blue? Would that be the Democrat Party? Affiliations with the Democratic Party. So folks, when you're giving to the cause, you're giving to the same people, the same party that has caused the problems to begin with.
You know, Lyndon B. Johnson said that I'm going to have these voting Democrat for the next 200 years. And we do, blindly. Latinos and blacks, we vote Democrat blind as hell. Don't even know why we do. We just do. Did you know that the black people are the ones that started the Republican Party? Did you know that? We were Republicans. They crippled us with welfare, Section 8.
Everybody says that Lyndon Johnson somehow had this conversion and he stopped being racist and he signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Democratic Party all just changed and they love black people. I don't believe that. I believe that tactics change, that the agenda stays the same, but people adapt different tactics. And that's why last week, and I got a lot of heat for this, for saying, hey, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, they operate the way the KKK operated. The KKK was started in the 1860s after the Emancipation Proclamation. It was the enforcement arm of the Democratic Party. The agenda was to force people to support Democratic politics and to keep black people in a substandard condition here in America. I don't think things changed in the 1960s. I think the tactics changed. You could no longer lynch people. It's too easy to get caught. We started prosecuting people. So we no longer lynch people, but we do bully them through social media campaigns. You have Black Lives Matter, Antifa, they will come to your home and intimidate you.
They'll take your job.
Take your way of living. Instead of burning crosses, we have burning buildings. And then if you look at the policies that the Democratic Party adopted from the 60s on, the elimination and the destruction of the black family, intentional.
You know that the Black Lives Matter website said one of their goals was to disrupt the nuclear family.
There are 3 levels of Black Lives Matter demands, okay? Don't forget, Black Lives Matter is an organization. It has a website. It has a list of demands. It has a Who We Are page. You can go to blacklivesmatter.com, I think it is. You can go to the website. Here's what you expect them to say. They say, okay, they want to expose and prevent police brutality. They want to stop unjust deaths at the hands of vigilantes. They want to stop the general racism that threatens black lives. Okay, right? Yeah, totally. We all get that. We all agree with that. We are self-reflexive and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift black trans folk. Huh? What? So look, don't mistake this. They're not intersectional in the way that leftist politics usually is. Saying like, yeah, you know, the Hispanics have something in common with the Muslims, have something in common with the lesbian tap dancers, have something in common, right, with all the disparate oppression groups that then can go and attack the oppressor group of straight white men who think that they're men, who come from money, who could write on and on and on. That's not what's happening. Every qualification here, trans, women, it's all about being black, which is in a way a little bit refreshing in leftist politics because it's a little more old school. It's a little more old school Marxism than whatever has been happening for the last few decades. They say especially we want to protect black trans women who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence. All this language, cisgender, privilege, trans folk, is the language of radicals. We build a space that affirms black women and is free from sexism, misogyny, and environments in which men are centered. Okay, getting more into the sexual politics. We practice empathy. We engage comrades with the intent to learn about and connect with their contexts. Comrades, an explicitly communist term. We make our spaces family-friendly and enable parents to fully participate with their children. We dismantle the patriarchal practice that requires mothers to work double shifts. Okay, so now the patriarchy is involved here. And then this is the money line.
The first draft of the Communist Manifesto, which Engels wrote, specifically wanted to dismember the family. And Marx decided that wasn't going to fly. And so when he rewrote it, he left that out. But that's been there. If you follow the left back over the past 2 centuries, you see in there one way or another where they try to undermine the decision-making autonomy of the family.
There's a reason that Karl Marx abhorred the traditional family. Let's just say that. He saw it as a capitalist institution based on capital and on private gain. He openly called for abolition of the family. There's a reason Stalin trained Soviet youth to become pioneers. That's what he called them, emissaries of the state who were told that the highest good involved ratting out your own family members. At one 1932 Soviet trial, a father actually cried out to his son, "It's me, your father," and the son replied, "Yes, he used to be my father, but I no longer consider him my father. I'm not acting as a son, but as a pioneer." Stalin used to go around Soviet Russia talking about this story and using it as an example of good behavior. Breaking down the family is a precondition to building up the state.
And Hillary Clinton said, it takes a village to raise a child. And someone said it takes a village idiot to believe that.
We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially for our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. If you support the nuclear family, then you are standing in opposition to Black Lives Matter. The Western prescribed nuclear family, as they put it.
Ces luttes reposent toutes sur l'approche dichotomique habituelle oppresseur-opprimé. Les féministes prétendent que les femmes sont opprimées par les hommes, les antiracistes prétendent que les gens de couleur sont opprimés par les blancs, le mouvement LGBT prétend que les minorités sexuelles sont opprimées par les personnes hétérosexuelles. Par conséquent, une cible commune à ces luttes se profile tout naturellement. L'homme, blanc, hétérosexuel, vit l'oppresseur au cube, considéré dès lors en partie ou complètement responsable de tous les maux de la Terre, comme l'a énoncé récemment une artiste féministe éminente, Camélia Jordana. J'ai d'ailleurs été surpris que cette simple énonciation ait suffi à déclencher une petite polémique. C'était comme si certains comprenaient seulement maintenant la nature et le contenu des forces qui sous-tendent le concept d'intersectionnalité, tout comme la volonté qu'ils véhiculent communément, celle de faire prévaloir et même régner ce qui est poliment qualifié de justice sociale sur la société occidentale, sinon sur la planète tout entière.
Cela a toujours été un fait assez peu connu voire déconsidéré chez la plupart de ces manifestants, mais comme l'indique cet article de ABC News datant du 21 juin 2020, Black Lives Matter, depuis son lancement, a toujours placé la lutte LGBTQ comme point central de sa lutte. Donc au-delà des apparences de sa dénomination, à la base, il s'agit avant tout d'un mouvement qui accorde une grande importance au profilage sexuel plutôt que racial. Cette sensibilité découle en grande partie des 3 fondatrices du mouvement puisque 2 d'entre elles s'identifient comme queer. L'un des objectifs inavoués de ces dernières est d'inclure officiellement ce qu'ils appellent la justice sexuelle, à la justice raciale. Une tâche qui, à en lire plusieurs articles de journaux mainstream américains, s'avère bien ambitieuse vu qu'une majorité de Noirs américains sont en réalité assez conservateurs. D'où les conséquences d'avancées masquées.
It's time we rise up and demand justice. We must do the work required to dismantle cisgendered privilege.
Those heterosexual.
Those straight people. We must defund the police, and our white allies will lobby Congress to disarm every American. So we are no longer shot by the police. And once we remove every Confederate statue and piece of history we don't like, all white people must kill themselves.
I was not expecting that.
Yeah. Their whiteness makes them the cornerstone of systematic racism. So we ask all white allies to use your privilege and sacrifice yourself for the greater good.
No.
I like white people. They got the best customer service. Then we take over city blocks and declare them communist utopias. What does that have to do with black people? Everyone works for the government. Everyone pays a carbon tax. Absolutely no borders. No private property. Yes. Joseph Stalin. Yes. Lenin. Marxism.
And Tucker, I'm just going to go all the way there. I think we are now seeing the LGBTQ community latch on to black oppression and try to use it to advance their cause. And anybody that strays from those agendas and that support, any person, black person that puts their advancement and their priorities ahead of the feminist movement and the LGBT movement is going to face stiff repercussions over social media in particular. And there's going to be celebrities, white and black, that are used like attack dogs to make sure that certain black men and others stay in line with the movement that the elite liberals want us to stick to, and that's the matriarchy, the empowerment of women, and the empowerment of the LGBT community.
Ne trahissant pas leur militantisme propre à l'extrême gauche, ces femmes qui s'autoproclament de la mouvance marxiste, ont établi de manière très officielle, sur le site internet blacklivesmatter.com, une liste énonçant la mission de leur organisation, parmi lesquelles on pouvait lire leur volonté de démanteler la famille nucléaire qu'elles définissent comme un modèle occidental, tout en se gardant bien de dire qu'il est extrêmement présent dans de nombreuses contrées du monde, dont une majorité de pays africains. Il me sied d'imaginer ces dernières allaient essayer de convaincre leurs frères et sœurs de couleur, d'abandonner leur modèle familial qu'ils chérissent tant.
Why are you gay?
La réponse qui les attendrait leur serait cinglante et leur remettrait un peu les pieds sur terre. Mais bref. Devant l'avalanche de critiques à l'égard de leur antagonisme familial, leurs diatribes ont dû être retirées du site, mais attention, cela ne veut pas dire qu'elles ne figurent plus parmi leurs objectifs. Il est assez étonnant d'entendre des personnes prétendant lutter pour la cause black vouloir détruire l'un des monuments qu'il manque à cette communauté noire américaine.
In terms of identity politics, we know what identity politics does. It divides and it polarizes. No matter how you want to look at it, that's just the effect of it, no matter how great the intentions are. And we all know the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So it's an interesting play right here. I don't know how many people really look into the mission statement of Black Lives Matter, but I did. And when you look into it, there's a couple things that jump out to me. And I'm a black man who's been black, and my life has mattered since 1974. And this organization was founded in 2013. I'm proud of you. But I've been fighting this fight for me and for others a lot longer. Two things. My family structure is so vital, important to me. Not only the one I grew up in, but the one I'm trying to create right now. Being a father and a husband, that's my mission in life right now. How do I reconcile that, what I just told you, with this mission statement that says, quote, we dismantle the patriarchal practice. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement. So when I see that, or as a mission statement for Black Lives Matter, it makes me scratch my head. When I also see their mission is to eradicate white supremacy. In 2020, white supremacy is the mission. Woo, that's a lot of digging through minutia right there. I am on a show that I'm hosting along with another black guy who is hosting with me, who replaced another black guy. And that's just one example of it.
Years ago, I interviewed Kwesi Mfume, then the president of the NAACP. As between the presence of white racism and the absence of black fathers, I asked him, which poses the bigger threat to the black community? Without missing a beat, he said, the absence of black fathers. It was President Barack Obama who said, we all know these statistics, that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. The Journal of Research on Adolescence confirms that even after controlling for varying levels of household income, kids in father-absent homes are more likely to end up in jail. And kids who never had a father in the house are the most likely to wind up behind bars. In 1960, 5% of America's children entered the world without a mother and father married to each other. By 1980, it was 18%. By 2000, it had risen to 33%, and 15 years later, the number reached 41%. For blacks, even during slavery, when marriage for slaves was illegal, black children were more likely than today to be raised by both their mother and father. Economist Walter Williams has written that, according to census data from 1890 to 1940, a black child was more likely to grow up with married parents than a white child. For blacks, out-of-wedlock births have gone from 25% in 1965 to 73% in 2015. For whites, from less than 5% to over 25%, and for Hispanics, out-of-wedlock births have risen to 53%. What happened to fathers? The answer is found in a basic law of economics. If you subsidize undesirable behavior, you will get more undesirable behavior.
Marriage. Again, the Thomas Sowell reader. Despite attempts to equate married couples with people who are living together as domestic partners, married couples, genuinely married couples, not domestic partners, are in fact better off by almost any standard you can think of.
Income. People who are married have higher income. Domestic violence. The rate of domestic violence in marriage is a fraction of what it is among people who are simply living together. The abuse of children in married couples, families, is a fraction of what the abuse of children is among people who are simply living together. So if you put it to an empirical test, it's just very clear that marriage makes a difference. Among blacks, black married couples have had a poverty rate in single digits every year since 1994. If you look at the poverty rate among blacks, it was 22%, and among whites it was 11%. But among black married couples, it was 7.5%.
Right.
So it's not so they not only do better than blacks as a whole, they do better than whites as a whole. So there is a difference.
In 1949, the nation's poverty rate was 34%. By 1965, it was cut in half to 17%, all before President Lyndon Johnson's so-called war on poverty. But after that war began in 1965, poverty began to flatline. From 1965 until now, the government has spent over $20 trillion to fight poverty. The poverty rate has remained unchanged, but the relationship between poor men and women has changed dramatically. That's because our generous welfare system allows women, in effect, to marry the government. And this makes it all too easy for men to abandon their traditional moral and financial responsibilities. Psychologists call such dependency learned helplessness. How do we know that the welfare state creates disincentives that hurt the very people we're trying to help? They tell us. In 1985, the Los Angeles Times asked both the poor and the non-poor whether poor women often have children to get additional benefits. Most of the non-poor respondents said no. However, 64% of poor respondents said yes. Now, who do you think is in a better position to know?
You see, it's part of the whole thing of third parties wanting to make decisions for which they pay no price when they're wrong. You see, when the parent raises the child the wrong way, the parent pays the price when the child goes down the tubes. But these third parties can sit back in their wherever they are, Washington or whatever, and if the things they tell us turn out to be wrong, it doesn't hurt them. For example, before we introduced sex education into the schools in the 60s, the rate of venereal disease had been going down every single year. Teenage pregnancy had been going down every single year. I think it was the rate of infection for gonorrhea in 1960 was half of what it was in 1950. So all these things were going down before the left came into the schools with their sex education. And all these things reversed and shot up immediately afterwards. But nobody who pushed that paid any price for it.
A lot of reasonable people think they support the Black Lives Matter movement because they think that Black Lives Matter, and they think the Black Lives Matter movement is about how Black lives matter. That's not what it's about, okay? I think the best analogy would be what they do in Congress. You know, whenever there's a really bad bill, really ugly, awful legislation that is really harmful to people, they give it a really nice sounding name. So you can almost judge how bad a bill is by how nice the name sounds. They will cram in the worst policies ever, and then they'll call the bill the Don't Murder Puppies Act of 2020. And they'll say, okay, Congressman, are you going to vote for the Don't Murder Puppies Act of 2020? And then you're in a bad spot because you say, actually, that bill is really terrible and it includes all this stuff that everyone's going to hate and it's going to destroy all of our lives. But they'll say, but it's called the Don't Murder Puppies Act, so you got to support it. It's the same thing with Black Lives Matter. They'll say, hold on, you don't support Black Lives Matter? What are you, a racist? What are you, a bigot? What are you, a white supremacist, neo-Nazi, Klansman Nazi supremacist? You say, no, I don't think we should destroy the family. So I can't, they tell me that if I support the family, I can't support BLM. And that's true. That's exactly what's going on here.
Tupac Shakur, the late rapper, once said, I know for a fact that had I had a father, I'd have some discipline, I'd have more confidence. He admitted he began running with gangs because he wanted the things a father gives to a child, especially to a boy: structure and protection. Your mother cannot calm you down the way a man can, Shakur said. You need a man to teach you how to be a man.
Black, 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 black. You ain't black. Black, 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 black. You ain't black. Come on, man.
Kamala Harris and the Democrats now are coming out and they're saying they're against these riots. But if you're against these riots, why would you be bailing people out? Now, you bail protesters out, but protesters usually are just released on their own recognizance, or it's a very small bail. Let's say it's $300. Early on, that was the average bail, $343. Now the average bail is $13,000. And Harris had been pushing an organization called the Minnesota Freedom Fund, and the donations were going to be spent on to bail out protesters that were arrested by police. Now, I mean, you shouldn't, if you're protesting, you don't go to jail in America. It's if you've done something. But these were not peaceful, and the left wanted them out of jail to be able to continue to wreak havoc. One of those that they bailed out was Jaleel Stallings. He's a guy that was peacefully protesting with a kind of a handmade gun that he made into an AK-47, where he was shooting at members of the SWAT team during the riots in May. They paid $75,000 in cash to get him out. Now, this is Kamala Harris. She's raising money for this group, and they're bailing him out. Why would you want him out on the streets? Why would you want him? The Biden campaign, Kamala Harris, they should be asked, why did you help fund the bail for an attempted cop killer?
But they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And this is a movement, I'm telling you. They're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not. And we should not.